the life story of Chris Evans. In a world where heroes are often imagined, created through fiction, and brought to life on screen, there are very few individuals who manage to make those heroes feel real. Because true heroism is not just about strength, it's about character, integrity, and the choices you make when no one is watching. Before the shield, before the global fame, before becoming a symbol recognized across the world, there was a young man growing up in Massachusetts. His name is Chris Evans. Raised in a family where creativity and discipline coexisted, he was introduced to storytelling at an early age. Not through fame, but through theater, through performance, through imagination. While others saw acting as entertainment, he began to see it as expression, a way to explore identity, a way to understand people. But the journey from a small-town upbringing to the global stage is never simple. It requires risk, uncertainty, and the courage to step into the unknown. From early struggles in New York to small roles in Hollywood, every step was a test, every opportunity a chance to prove something. But success doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from persistence, from growth, from the willingness to evolve, even when the path is unclear. And then came the moment that would change everything. A role that demanded more than performance. A role that required belief, responsibility, and a deep understanding of what it means to lead. Through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he would become more than an actor. He would become a symbol. But this story is not just about a superhero. It's about the man behind the character, the choices he made, the risks he took, and the identity he built along the way. Because in the end, the most powerful stories are not about perfection. They are about growth. This is the life story of Chris Evans. Birth and early childhood in Massachusetts. On June 13, 1981, in Boston, Massachusetts, a child was born who would one day become one of the most recognizable heroes in modern cinema. His name was Chris Evans. He was raised in the nearby town of Sudbury, in a close-knit and supportive family. His father, Robert Evans, worked as a dentist, while his mother, Lisa Evans, was deeply involved in the arts as a theater director. This combination of discipline and creativity played a major role in shaping his early life. From a young age, Chris was surrounded by storytelling. His mother's connection to theater meant that performance, expression, and creativity were part of everyday life. Family gatherings often included playful acting, humor, and artistic expression. These early influences created an environment where imagination was encouraged rather than limited. Unlike many future stars, Chris did not grow up in Hollywood or with industry connections. His upbringing was grounded, structured, and focused on education and personal growth. However, within that normal life, a creative spark was quietly developing, one that would later guide his entire career. Discovering acting influence of family and environment. Chris Evans did not initially set out to become a global movie star. Like many young individuals, his path developed gradually. However, one key influence stood out: his mother. As a theater director, she exposed him to the world of acting from an early age. Watching rehearsals, observing performances, and understanding how stories were brought to life on stage had a lasting impact on him. During his school years, Chris began participating in theater productions. What started as a simple activity soon became something more meaningful. He discovered that acting allowed him to express himself in ways that everyday life could not. He enjoyed the process of becoming different characters, exploring emotions, and connecting with audiences. Unlike traditional academic pursuits, acting gave him a sense of freedom and excitement. This realization marked an important shift. Acting was no longer just an influence, it was becoming a direction, training, and early ambitions. After completing high school, Chris Evans made a decision that would define his future. He moved to New York City to pursue acting seriously. In New York, he enrolled in acting classes and began studying the craft in a structured environment. This period was crucial. It was here that he transitioned from interest to commitment. He learned the fundamentals of acting: voice control, emotional delivery, stage presence, and character development. More importantly, he began to understand the discipline required to succeed in the industry. New York also exposed him to competition. He was surrounded by other aspiring actors, all working towards similar goals. This environment pushed him to improve, to refine his skills, and to take his ambitions seriously. However, like many beginners, he faced uncertainty. Opportunities were limited, and success was not guaranteed. But instead of discouraging him, these challenges strengthened his determination. Early roles and entry into Hollywood. Chris Evans' transition from training to professional acting began with small roles. He started with television appearances and minor film parts, gradually building experience and visibility. One of his early roles came in the television series Opposite Sex, which gave him initial exposure. Although the show was short-lived, it provided him with valuable on-screen experience. He then began appearing in films, taking on supporting roles that allowed him to understand the dynamics of the film industry. These early projects were not major successes, but they were essential steps in his development. During this phase, Chris focused on learning rather than instant fame. Each role, no matter how small, contributed to his growth as an actor. Slowly but steadily, he was moving forward. Breakthrough, gaining recognition. Chris Evans' early breakthrough came with roles that began to capture audience attention. One of the most notable was his performance in Not Another Teen Movie. While the film was a comedy and very different from the roles he would later become famous for, it introduced him to a wider audience. It showcased his screen presence, timing, and ability to connect with viewers. He continued to build his career with roles in various films, gaining experience across different genres. However, the real turning point came when he was cast in Fantastic Four, where he played the character Human Torch. This role brought him mainstream recognition. For the first time, he was part of a major studio production with a global audience. It established him as a rising star in Hollywood. However, despite this success, Chris Evans was still searching for something more, a role that would define his career and elevate him to a completely new level. The defining role becoming Captain America. After years of steady progress in Hollywood, Chris Evans reached a point where he needed more than just success. He needed a defining role. That opportunity came when he was offered the character of Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America in the expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film, Captain America: The First Avenger, was not just another superhero movie. It was the introduction of a character that symbolized courage, integrity, and moral strength. However, accepting the role was not an easy decision. Chris Evans initially hesitated. The commitment required was massive: a long-term contract, global exposure, and the pressure of representing an iconic character known worldwide. Accepting the role meant that his life would change permanently. After careful consideration, he decided to take the risk. That decision would define his career. Global stardom through the Marvel Universe. With the release of Captain America: The First Avenger, Chris Evans introduced the world to his version of Captain America, a character grounded in humility, bravery, and unwavering principles. The success of the film led to his continued involvement in multiple projects within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, including the Avengers series. These films were not just commercially successful, they became cultural phenomena. Millions of fans across the globe connected with the characters, and Chris Evans became one of the central faces of this global franchise. His portrayal of Captain America stood out because it was not just about physical strength. It was about emotional depth. He portrayed Steve Rogers as a human being first, someone who struggles, questions, and grows, rather than just a superhero. Over time, the character evolved, and so did Chris's performance. He brought maturity, complexity, and leadership to the role, making Captain America one of the most respected characters in modern cinema. Beyond superheroes, exploring versatility. Despite his massive success as Captain America, Chris Evans was determined not to be limited by a single role. He actively sought opportunities to explore different types of characters and genres. He appeared in films such as Snowpiercer, where he played a darker, more complex character in a dystopian setting. This role allowed him to break away from the traditional hero image and demonstrate his range as an actor. Later, in Knives Out, he took on a completely different role, showcasing his ability to handle humor, mystery, and layered storytelling. These choices reflected his desire to grow as an artist. Rather than relying solely on blockbuster success, he aimed to build a diverse and meaningful career. personal growth, and stepping away. As his career reached its peak, Chris Evans began to reflect on his life beyond acting. Years of working on large-scale productions had brought him immense success, but they also required significant time and energy. After completing his journey as Captain America, particularly with the film Avengers Endgame, he made a conscious decision to step back from the role. This was a significant moment. Walking away from such a successful character is not easy. It involves leaving behind global recognition and a major source of career stability. However, Chris chose personal growth over comfort. He began exploring directing, storytelling, and projects that aligned more closely with his personal interests. This transition showed a different side of him, one focused not just on performance, but on creative control and meaningful work. Legacy more than just a superhero. Today, Chris Evans is recognized as more than just an actor. His portrayal of Captain America has become iconic, representing values such as integrity, courage, and leadership. However, his legacy extends beyond a single character. He represents dedication, thoughtful decision-making, and the willingness to evolve. From a young man influenced by theater in Massachusetts to one of the most recognizable faces in global cinema, his journey reflects persistence and growth. He has shown that true success is not just about achieving fame, but about making choices that align with one's values and identity.